It's a comedy.
If you just
So, after part 1, a cheesy, stylized action romp that's very much a product of its time.
I love it so much, man. It's like a vampire hunting John Wick awesome.
And part 2 that delves deeper into the world building, characters, themes of classism and prejudice. A beautiful follow-up that expands on its story and narrows its focus simultaneously for an experience that has more substance to accommodate the style.
Blade 2 combines the fun of the first film with the more focused, expressive, and personal touch that Del Toro brings to the screen with a lot of energy.
You land on the stunning conclusion. A big lasagna of sadness. Come on, guys, you gave me this one?
Hey man, you said you wanted it so you could do that Joker intro thing.
I mean, I could have still done that with Blade 2.
Let's not bring this back up again, guys. Xavier, you can still do the video game instead.
Okay, never mind, we good.
Make it look like an accident, Blade.
This movie's an interesting case in that it feels like it had everything going against it from day one. It's a miracle this thing made it out the door when every individual aspect of the movie is so troubled.
Just sit and watch Blade Trinity. It's a D-. But if you know what they went through to get that movie made, it is an A+. The fact that that movie exists puts it above Citizen Kane. With all the craziness that went down.
Every decision was shaky at best. Every component that needed more fine-tuning is rushed to completion with the mentality of, good enough, I guess. So let's start with the broad strokes and focus in on what went wrong. Time to set the scene. Picture this. You're a young screenwriter by the name of David S. Goyer. You wrote 2 of the first successful comic book films ever, but you need to do it again. So you tap out a script and...
You know, funny you should say that because I was going through some old videos and this is starting to sound a bit familiar.
Ugh, fine, okay, we'll go with third person. David Foyer was tasked with following up the previous films, but Wesley Snipes, the face of the whole project, isn't happy with the script he put together. Nor does he like the director they have picked out, who, according to my research, might have been Stephen Norrington, the director of the first film. Norrington allegedly passed on it because he didn't like the script either. Blade 2's director, Guillermo del Toro, was offered the project and said no, because he was more interested in making Hellboy, which was rad. Oliver Hirsch's last name was considered and said no because of scheduling conflicts. So Goyer, who had no experience directing a feature film, decided to just do it himself. I won't say this is the biggest mistake made in production, but a first-time director helming a major sequel has a track record of... suckers! Being iffy. In addition to his inexperience, Goyer was apparently not popular with Blade himself.
He tried to strangle the director one day, literally tried to strangle him.
Wesley Snipes hated working with him, to the point of refusing to speak with him directly. He'd even send his assistant to do it, or just communicate with sticky notes.
He would communicate with Post-its that he would give to the director, and each one he would sign Blade.
He'd refuse to shoot some scenes, requiring them to use stand-ins or just CGI Snipes' face onto a stunt double. It's hard to make your Blade movie work when Blade doesn't want to be there.
He would only answer to the name Blade. You couldn't call him, and you'd walk by his trailer, and this wall of pot stench would just be like, whoa, and kind of push you to the side.
The starring actor is locking himself in his trailer to smoke pot all day because he hates the director so much, resulting in the title character of the movie having less than 100 lines of dialogue, most of which are a single word, and barely any screen time. Given everything I've learned in film school, in my expert opinion I'd say, that sucks. Even Chris Christopherson, the man behind Blade's sidekick Whistler, said he wasn't happy with Goyer's script either, because he didn't like how many new characters it shoved in artificially to expand the film's universe. Given the silly-ass alternate ending with Ryan Reynolds and Whistler's daughter fighting a terrible-looking vampire werewolf, one could assume these two were meant to have some kind of spin-off series that never went anywhere. So let's break down these two big factors: direction and the script. Goyer's direction is odd to say the least. A lot of people in Hollywood think they can direct. They take one look at it and go, yeah, I could totally handle that, and then shortly after it's clear they have no idea what they're doing. The pacing and movement of the actors always feels so clunky. The actors themselves feel like they're cringing at the movie they're in.
I was there when they crucified him.
Like they don't believe the dialogue they're saying and are just resigning to act as cartoony as possible to get some of these words out. The camera work is a jittery mess and it never feels like it knows the appropriate place to be for the scene they're going for. Like this emotional death scene filmed at a completely flat angle in one continuous shot. When you want to convey emotion, typically the camera is supposed to zoom in on an actor's most valuable asset for doing so. Their faces. But Blade is just like awkwardly standing there with no idea what to do with his arms. He looks like an introverted YouTuber trying to address the audience directly. Goyer also instructed Jessica Biel to aim for the camera with her bow and arrow for a really cool shot, resulting in her shooting it straight through the lens and costing the production $300,000 to replace it.
She hit a complete bullseye and the arrow embedded itself about 6 inches into the camera, went through the lens, and we ended up destroying quite a few cameras over the course of the film, which I guess isn't really a badge of honor, but...
Dave, maybe you should have told her to aim a little lower. The girl's a really damn good shot. The action scenes are far less tight than they used to be. All the slick choreography and badass martial arts is now toned down to like slow judo moves where the actors are just kind of flipping each other around. Shit like this happens a lot. Then there's this guy getting kicked and then they don't know what to do with him, so he just disintegrates. The fight choreography feels noticeably ungraceful, so they try to overcompensate with faster editing. Meaning, you're seeing something very stiff and slow with shaky cam and constant fast cuts from completely nonsense camera angles to make it appear faster and more kinetic than it actually is. I've heard that Guillermo del Toro studied the work of the director from the first Blade movie to try and make sure he knew what to do with the visual style and action scenes. There was a sense of continuity between those two films, while the Goyer-directed Blade feels so sloppy by comparison. On the list of things that made Blade memorable, the sense of style and smoothness was at the top. The guy always made fighting hordes of the undead seem so effortless, but Trinity has his lowest vampire kill count of the series, and he just doesn't give off the same superhuman vibe anymore. Compare this to any action scene from the first two movies. Look at that solid, well-planned out choreography with well-paced editing and long camera takes to let you really see what's going on in detail. Just look how differently they film a sword fight in both films. And that's not to say the vampires are more evenly matched with him either. They're just as slow and lacking proper direction as he is. What is Blade without the style or the ass-kicking 90s Matrix-influenced cool factor?
It's a bad movie, but it's a bad Blade movie.
Dude, why'd you have him say that?
I'm aware that the photography and action choreography aren't entirely up to Goyer, but it's his job as a director to unite all parts of production and make sure these things are lining up properly. If every individual part of production is floundering, then you have to acknowledge that he wasn't entirely ready to handle all those moving parts at once. And all of those people are shakily synchronized over the tempo of his script, which we've established no one involved was a fan of.
Have you done your taxes yet?
Yes, I have.
You have?
Yes, I have.
Look at me and tell me you haven't. Take off the glasses and tell me if you've done your taxes, if you filed.
I've done my taxes.
Yeah, you didn't. You know, I've told you this a million times. You can fight the undead, but you can't fight the IRS. Go get your W-2, go get your receipts, and we're going to do it right now.
One of my teachers in film school once asked the classic question: how can the rest of a movie improve upon a bad script? And the students around the room said things like, just have the performances make the lines more believable, shoot it really well, give it a good soundtrack to make the emotion land a little more. And then he just stopped us and said, the answer is you can't fix a bad script. A bad script is a bad movie. The story of Blade Trinity is that vampires have resurrected Dracula from his ancient slumber to help him finally beat the human race once and for all. To hinder Blade, they frame him for a murder so that the human world is now afraid of him. Along the way, he meets a new group of young vampire slayers that want to team up and help him defeat the vampire horde one final time.
We know what you are. You're a stone-cold killer.
And you're sick as fuck.
Considering the previous two films were serviceable or pretty good in terms of writing, you have to wonder what changed. Why'd it get all fucked up this time? It's because this wasn't the idea Goyer wanted to go with either. Goyer's original pitch for Blade 3 was a post-apocalyptic scenario where the vampires had won and taken over the world decades in the future, with Blade aging slower than he should due to his vampirism and becoming humanity's last hope. Basically like Old Man Blade. The studio turned this down because it sounded too depressing, and then he had to lazily cobble together a new idea that he seemed far less invested in. Thus, Blade Trinity is riddled with ideas and characters introduced only to serve no purpose and be forgotten about shortly after. The idea of making Blade a fugitive from the law of the human world was a really cool one, but as soon as they take him in, he's saved by Ryan Reynolds and then it's never really an issue again. Throughout the entire movie, he's just running around in broad daylight, coming and going as he pleases in public places with a fucking samurai sword on his back, and no one calls the cops. The police are never hot on his trail. No one recognizes him as this
public enemy number one
until the ending, which is an awkward mess anyway. Snipes was so disinterested in this scene that they had to CGI his eyes open because he wouldn't cooperate. Then Blade awkwardly beats up a bunch of innocent people, and then they took this out with reshoots and added some voiceover to explain that Dracula pretended to be Blade's body to do him a favor, I guess. I don't know.
Nobody really knows the specifics of his origin.
Oh no, that wouldn't have been interesting information to know. Fuck that. But the slow walking through the city sequence with rap music is what made it to the final edit. There's no point in bringing Whistler back from the dead in Blade 2, only to have killed him off again in a way less ceremonious way in this one.
Why aren't you smarter?
If I was Kristen, I wouldn't have liked this direction for my character either. And no one else in the movie seems to mourn or care. In Blade 1, this motivated Blade to kick ass more than ever. But this time Whistler dies and he just kinda sleepwalks away from the whole thing and doesn't seem to think about it too much. This little girl serves no purpose in the movie except to make us more mad at Dracula for kidnapping her. It's like they're trying so hard to convince you that he's a bad guy because his face and voice don't do it. Even seemingly new ideas this movie has are actually all recycled. Like this vampire final solution they talk about is actually a scrapped idea from a scene in Blade 1. The whole arc of everyone trying to convince Blade that a little teamwork wouldn't kill him has been done already. And it's undermined by the fact that he does everything his way and acts as stubborn as possible and still succeeds at pretty much everything. Like a Hollywood actor.
Summerfield managed to treat me with a cure, and now I killed him.
Just gonna casually brush off that whole thing about how vampires can be cured and totally rehabilitated, even though a lot of them are infected against their will. Nope, let's make a virus that'll wipe them all out. There's so many scenes that don't have any purpose being there. Why does Dracula walk around the city and try to kill people that try to sell him vampire sex toys? Why does Blade have this weird interaction with this little girl? Is that to humanize him?
Why can't you just be nice?
Because the world isn't nice.
He just seems more of an inhuman weirdo than ever now. Why do we get some kind of emotional shower scene with Abigail remembering her father's words about not wanting her to be a vampire hunter? Clearly he let her be one and it wasn't a major conflict between them, and it doesn't really play into any kind of character arc she had. There's also a lot of scenes where they just let Ryan Reynolds be funny and say hilarious dialogue that doesn't really amount to anything. This movie is a lot of completely disconnected, interchangeable scenes with occasionally bland action set pieces thrown in between long bouts of stilted dialogue performed by actors who don't like the script and don't want to be there, filmed and edited in the most obnoxious and confusing way possible. Bad directing, bad script, bad pacing, bad editing, bad acting. This is balls on a filmmaker.
Shut the fuck up.
But maybe, just maybe, the cast can kind of save it with their own natural charisma. I feel like they planned on Hannibal King being a more popular character than he was. They devote so much screen time to him just being himself.
Me, I'm more of a Don Johnson fan. A lot of people don't know he recorded an album. I'm more of an Andrea Bocelli fan. He's blind. Me, I'm more of a Celine Dion fan. She's a Canadian treasure.
And I've been calling him Ryan Reynolds so far because that's what he is. He talks exactly how he does in every other movie he's allowed to improvise in.
You cock-juggling thunder cunt!
That wheezing bag of dick tips has it coming.
Coked up. Borg and McEnroe.
I feel like they didn't write him any dialogue and just told Ryan on set to do whatever he felt like. So we get his trademark speech pattern of calling people super complicated insults or just casually working in silly references. In the right conditions, this can really work for him.
What did you think I was apologizing for?
I mean, there's a list. Green Lantern, R.I.P.D.,
Horrible.
Selfless,
Terrible.
Blade Trinity.
Oof.
But here it feels out of place with the rest of the movie's grim tone.
And unlike typical vampires, her fangs are located in her vagina. Moving on.
I especially hate how there's always these awkward little pauses after his lines like it's a goddamn sitcom, and they want the audience to catch their breath before the next side-splitting zinger.
And that's basically turning a frown upside down.
I'm sorry, I ate a lot of sugar today.
Would you consider doing a fourth Blade movie? And I was wondering, would you be interested to do another one, to be back as Hannibal King, or... No. Why?
No.
As stated before, Blade's half asleep. Sometimes he's actually asleep. Whistler is basically a blink and you'll miss him cameo, and he's not exactly into his performance either. Patton Oswalt is introduced and has this hilarious scene.
Have you ever been laid?
Many times. With ladies.
Then is killed off screen. Katniss Whistler is... it's just a complete flatline. Goth vampire lady is so campy that she feels out of place in every scene. This wouldn't be a Marvel movie without a healthy amount of pointless studio interference, and apparently the producers loved Triple H's screen presence so much that they had extra dialogue and scenes added for him so we could get bangers like this line.
And when the fuck did you see my dick, fuckface?
And last but not least, Lincoln Burrows himself, Dracula. He has to be one of the most horribly miscast villains in a comic book movie. Dracula is typically a character that we associate with a lot of sinister charisma. He's a manipulator that has you entranced and subject to his will. His hatred for humanity is held in such a classy and understated way. He's too good for us mere mortals, too powerful, too intelligent. He sees humanity as his weak little playthings. God damn, Dracula, your fit is trash! Dominic Purcell captures none of this as Dracula, whom they keep calling Drake because I guess they were too embarrassed to use Dracula half the time. Not that the script is helping him any, but he has none of the presence that a world-ending villain needs. He just seems too, well, nice.
Careful, Daywalker. I've heard about you. Sorry, guys. Now she's biting.
I can't see this guy as a heartless villain. I just get the impression that he's a really chill guy that's trying to be the bad guy in his 12-year-old son's video project. None of this evil dialogue sounds genuine or believable.
Your sacrament can set us free now.
What makes you think I care? I was the first of the vampires. I am unique.
He certainly doesn't look villainous. He looks like some kind of hipster pirate, or cabin boy, or a hunky guy with frosted tips in an early 2000s soap opera. Not the Prince of Darkness. When he's utilized well, he's a pretty good actor. I feel like he plays better as a conflicted, normal guy who makes the wrong decisions, but still ultimately wants to do the right thing. For a while, he was my top pick to play Venom, so I don't dislike the guy at all, but I just don't get that villainous vibe from him here. And that causes major problems because he's presented as the overwhelming ultimate enemy force for the movie. Everyone's emphasizing his strength, and he just seems like any other random vampire Blade has killed several thousand of. Everyone's acting so afraid of this guy who isn't remotely scary. So what do we have left? Poor direction, a cast that's either barely trying or trying too hard, action scenes that feel stiff and unsatisfying, story full of misplaced or rehashed ideas, and a leather trench coat and sunglasses wearing 90s action style that by this point was starting to wear thin if it wasn't done properly. This came out after 2 X-Men movies and 2 Spider-Man movies. As many strides as the Blade series made to bring comic book movies to the mainstream in the 90s, by the mid-2000s it was only repeating itself while other things innovated and evolved. All these other movies were coming out with direct adaptations of comic storylines, massive budgets, and insane action that had never been visualized in film before.
gotta be kidding me.
While Blade's just struggling behind with more quote-unquote original stories full of the same thing he was doing 6 years ago, but with a tenth of the enthusiasm. In the comics, we have storylines about S.H.I.E.L.D. stealing his blood to make an army of cloned Daywalker super soldiers and Blade hunting necromancers. But we had yet another sequel of him fighting overconfident, edgy vampires that seem like snotty rich teenagers.
You never know what you're going to get when you make a movie. You never know which performances are going to pop. Things that work really well on the written page just end up working horribly, you know, on screen, and vice versa. You have no idea, and so you can think a scene will play, you know, excellently, and when it's cut together, it's just flat and dead as a dog. And I mean, writing a script is not the same thing as making a movie.
Everything that made Blade stand out before was now holding him back. And all it took was one repetitive sequel to cause Hollywood to forget about him. Until now. God knows if the MCU can handle a character like this and how the new version of him will compare to the old one. But I'm just happy that we haven't seen the last of Blade, and for now, there's a little bit of hope. The bar was set incredibly high, but then incredibly low. It probably won't be R-rated, but when the bad guys in the movie turn to ash and dust when you stab them instead of your typical gory mess, it doesn't need to be rated R. All they have to do is capture some of that old spirit of effortless, stylized, visceral, vampire-killing badassery. And it'll at least be better than Trinity.
Wait, which one of us is going to cover the spin-off TV show?
I'm too busy reviewing the next 6 seasons of Titans, but saying I won't ever watch it again between each video.
I can't. I'm already putting off like 4 retrospective series and making another 3 Spider-Man videos this month while complaining about being associated with Spider-Man. Did you know there's a Moon Knight reference in that show?
And I suppose next you're going to tell me that werewolves exist.
My colleague Mark Spector's area of expertise.
Well, I'm still working on my video reviews of Avatar: The Last Airbender because those are just so topical right now, so, I mean, you see the position I'm in.
Can I do it? Hello, gamers. What about me? Famous YouTuber Sliver Boy.
Shut up,
Scott. Fuck up, Scott.
You're really showing your true colors behind those monotone voices, you sick bastards. How about all 3 of you go back to using MCU Spider-Man for clicks and views? Fucking sellouts. Oh, look at me, I'm Captain Midnight. Ooh, ooh. You do realize that's a copyrighted character, right? You're gonna get fucking sued. Hello, I'm Alex from High Top Film. Your whole branding is a shoe. What the fuck's wrong with you?